Hi, my name is Dana Williamson, conservator and manager of the collection here at the Petersen Automotive Museum. And today we're going to take a short tour in the vault, and we're going to specialize with or concentrate on cars of heads of state and some Hollywood cars. A little stories on different Hollywood cars and their owners and their movies. So we're here at the vault, presented by Hagerty. And we're going to go in and take a look at some of these great cars that have great stories. So we're going to be doing many of these videos while the museum is closed, so please go on our website, look at times, look at a schedule, and hop on and see some of our great content. All right, let's go. So right now we're entering the vault, and down here in the vault, deep below the Petersen Automotive Museum, we have over 250 cars, motorcycles, some trucks. And like I said, what we're going to do right now is we're going to kind of concentrate on some Hollywood cars and some heads of state cars. But as we're walking up through the inner vault toward the outer vault, as you can see around me, a collection of motorcycles. And I guess we could say we have some celebrity motorcycles. Back here we have some Husqvarnas. These are all off-road bikes. That one on your left was James Coburn's, built for him by Steve McQueen. So the one right here in front of us was Steve's desert sled. The one next to that is the bike that Steve used in the movie On Any Sunday. And then this one here in the front was owned by Bruce Brown, who was actually the director of the movie On Any Sunday. Coming up further, another motorcycle on our right that we'll be seeing is this 1929 Indian Chief. This was also Steve McQueen's. This is one of his favorite bikes that he used to ride. Of course, I know that's saying a lot because Steve had a collection of hundreds of motorcycles, so I'm sure he had hundreds of favorites. And then next to that, we have the Harley Davidson of the late Jessie Combs that she used when she was Grand Marshal last year at Sturgis. Now, as we continue through the vault, coming up to our first Hollywood car, you can look around and you can see supercars, you can see exotic cars, American classics. But right in front of us is a 1927 Rolls-Royce Phantom limousine. This car is gorgeous. It's a beautiful car. It's a two-tone green, and it was owned by the dancer Fred Astaire. A lot of you remember Fred Astaire from the 20s and 30s, an incredible dancer, an actor, made many movies. As you'll notice, the chauffeur's compartment is open. It did have a fabric that you could stretch over the top for rainy weather or inclement weather. But other than that, the chauffeur was out to the elements, but Fred Astaire would ride in here with silk upholstery, wool carpeting, really appointed very well. So this is what he would have been driven every day to MGM Studios, where he would film and dance his heart out. Now on the back, so trunks that we have on cars now are called trunks because trunks on backs of cars were originally trunks. And what we have here is an original Louis Vuitton trunk, which is probably worth as much as some of the cars in here. And the previous owner that owned this car of Fred Astaire's was also a Fred Astaire collector. He loved Fred Astaire. So he amassed a collection of Fred Astaire spats, dancing shoes, cricket bat, tennis racket, flask, thermos, scarf, top hat, many items that had been Fred Astaire's. And what he used to do, or what he did, was, if I can open this here, he displayed them here in the Louis Vuitton trunk. Unfortunately, I don't have them in there now for you to see. What we've done is we've taken them, they've been archived, and they're being held in conditions that would help preserve them for longevity. Now, as we continue back through the inner vault, as you can see over my shoulder. We're going into the outer vault where we have a huge collection of automobiles. We are in the process, while we're closed, of course, cleaning, making sure cars are cleaned and making sure they're protected. So we're covering some depending upon the finishes and depending upon the cars. So the first head of state car that we're going to talk about right now is the one right in front of me. This is a 1942 Lincoln. Now, this particular Lincoln was the presidential limo of FDR. So, you know, we're coming off of Pearl Harbor, and the government is saying, you know something, we really need something to protect the president. We've never had a armored limousine, but I think we need one for FDR. So they built this particular car. This particular car weighs 8,000 pounds. As a matter of fact, it's so heavy that it broke the first frame when they built it, and also the rear end, and they had to put a truck rear end in it in order to perform with all the weight. The windows on this car are over an inch thick. They're an inch and an eighth thick. It uses plates of 1/8-inch glass, and they're all welded together, glued together. That gives it the bulletproof glass. The doors are lined with lead to absorb the bullets, and there is also a metal mesh that encompasses the engine compartment, which would absorb bullets too before they were ever able to get to the engine, and it's mesh, and in that way it would be able to cool. The engine would get cooling. It wasn't just in a solid box. There's a little flap here, a little chrome flap, so when this window does go down, of course you have an inch and an eighth gap in the door. This would flop over that when the window was down, hence you wouldn't lose anything inside the door. So as you can see on the back, we have handles and we have steps where Secret Service would stand there and they would hold on. Now there is a story, we've been told, it could be true, could not be true, but the government wasn't sure how to make a armored car or an armored limousine. So they were, of course, researching and figuring out ways to do it and how to do it. And it was about the same time, I think, that Al Capone's car was confiscated because he was arrested. And Al Capone actually had a fully armored and bulletproof car, go figure. So I have a feeling that he figured it out before the government, but this is a very, very heavy armored limousine. Now, so this is a 42. As I mentioned, it was for FDR. And if we look behind us now, we're going to see another presidential limousine. And this is the Chrysler Imperial, the 52 Chrysler Imperial of Dwight Eisenhower. So now we're 10 years later, and we're not involved in a war. So there wasn't concern that the president would be in danger. So as you can see, this is not armored, this is not bulletproof, it doesn't even have a top. So this parade limo was used by Eisenhower, and at the time, Chrysler built 3 of these. One was in the city, one for the city of Los Angeles, one for the city of Detroit, and one for the city of New York. This is actually the Detroit car. So this is the only presidential limo of the 3 that is owned privately, and we own it here at the Petersen Museum. The city of Los Angeles owns the other one, and the city of New York still owns that one, which they use for parades and for dignitaries. This one is also used for the same purposes. We've loaned this out for different parades and different dignitaries. So this was Eisenhower rode in this, Nixon rode in it, but it was the perfect limo for ticker tape parades. So astronauts, many of the astronauts would have sat on the back, sat on top of there, and the ticker tape parades. And depending upon where they were in the States, they would use whatever limo was available closer to them, whether it was from Los Angeles, Detroit, or New York. Now we're going to talk about movie cars and heads of state cars at the same time. So as we go down the left-hand side here, we come across this little 1954 Nash-Healey. I'm pointing this out because this car was used by Audrey Hepburn. She rode in this car in the original Sabrina movie, and it was also used by Clark Kent in the original television series of Superman. So, you know, some people have said, oh, that's Superman's car, but it really isn't. As we know, Superman didn't need a car. He flew, but Clark Kent needed a car, so this would be parked in front of the Daily Planet, or, of course, parked next to a phone booth, where Clark Kent would jump out, he would get in the phone booth, and then he became Superman. Great Hollywood stories. Now on my right is a Mercedes that is also, as we talked about FDR's car, this is also fully armor plated and bulletproof glass. If you look really closely, you can see that the glass does not curve as the door frame does. It's just straight and flat. That's because it is bulletproof glass. This particular car belonged to Imelda Marcos, the Marcoses of the Philippines, and as you know, they were not very popular. In the trunk of this car is an oil generator, oil smoke generator, so that if someone was chasing them, they could release hot oil that would create a very dense, sticky, slippery oil smoke screen. In the back you'll see those lights. Those are two aircraft landing lights that could also blind the person behind them. But with all this, there was still room for many of her thousands of pairs of shoes in the trunk, I think. Now we come to a Ji Limousine. So Ji, meaning red flag, was a Chinese automotive manufacturer. And this particular car was not used for any specific dignitary, but anybody who was either a diplomat or a statesman or someone very important would ride in this car. And it is said that the Dalai Lama had ridden in this car a couple of times. But it is you know, when you look at it, and also the next car that we're going to talk about, you can see a lot of American influences, a lot of influences from Packard and from Chrysler and from Ford. The next car we come to is a Chaika. So Chaika is a Russian-made car. This is a Chaika parade car. As you notice, it's a convertible. Still, you know, nobody's is worrying about safety at this point. This particular car was commissioned from Chaika by Nikita Khrushchev to give to Yuri Gagarin. I always mispronounce his name. Sorry about that, Yuri. He was the first man in space. He actually received this car as a gift, had it until he died, and then it was taken, Khrushchev took back ownership of the car. Behind that, as we approach the next car, this is the parade car, the Pope-mobile as we call it. So this car was built for Pope John Paul II. He was coming to Mexico to address, you know, for a parade and for a big gathering. But he had been, before that, he had been, there was an attempt on his life. Someone tried to assassinate the Pope. So immediately after that happened, of course, even though this had been commissioned from General Motors by the Vatican, that they did not want the Swiss Guard said the Pope could not ride in any more open cars. So this particular car was equipped, this seat raises up and down, so he could sit in the seat, and hydraulically the seat would come up. He could be much higher and viewed much better, or it could go down. The door would open, and it has steps that fold out, so it would be easy for him to get up. But like I said, unfortunately, he couldn't use the car. He did bless the car in Mexico. The Swiss Guard let him bless the car, and then, of course, General Motors said, "Wow, what do we do with a used Pope-mobile?" So here it sits at the Petersen Automotive Museum. Very, very stately Cadillac. And now this white, you might say, holy car in front of us is contradicted by this black car that we have behind us. So this black car is a Mercedes Landaulet limo. Now, this particular car was owned by Saddam Hussein. That's why I say we have a holy white and a disturbing black car. Now, Mr. Petersen wanted a Landaulet really badly. This is the Landaulet was a very rare model of Mercedes. In the chauffeur compartment was a hardtop, and the passenger compartment was a convertible. So Mr. Petersen had looked far and wide for this model of car. Didn't have much luck. Friend of his was in Jordan, passed a Mercedes dealer, and he said, "Pete, you're not going to believe this. I think I saw a Landaulet in back of the Mercedes dealer. You should come over and take a look." At the time, Mr. Petersen had Petersen Aviation, and where he had several 8 to 10 jets and a couple of helicopters that he would lease. Petersen Aviation used to lease jet time to corporations that didn't want their executives to fly commercial but didn't want to buy a plane, so they would lease time with Petersen Aviation. He hopped on one of his jets, flew over to Jordan, said, "That's it, Landaulet, this is what I want," signed the papers, and then realized it was Saddam Hussein's car. So there are steps on this. This is not an armored car, does not have bulletproof glass. That's why you'll see it has steps on the side for his security and his bodyguards, handles on the back. And this car is in the original state as it was when it was found in Jordan, when everything went down with the Shah. One of his generals apparently hopped in the car and drove it until it ran out of gas. And apparently it ended up in Jordan. Now, we're going to do some Hollywood cars. I think that just about does it for our heads of state cars right now. So on my left, we're going to look at some cars. We have the Lincoln of Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield had all Jayne Mansfield's cars were pink. She would order them in pink. This is her Lincoln that was her daily driver. Not the car people always ask if this was the car that she was killed in, but it was not. This Lincoln Premier was, like I said, her daily driver. And I think, this is one of the first Lincolns that was equipped with air conditioning. She ordered it special with air conditioning because she knew how hot it would get in cars, and she wanted to be cool while she was driving. Next to Jayne Mansfield's Lincoln Premier, we have Carole Lombard's 1941 Cadillac. Unfortunately, Clark Gable had ordered this Cadillac new from Cadillac, from the dealer, and he had it customized here in Los Angeles by Coachcraft. He had the running boards were cut off, the dashboard was painted red, it had the top was chopped, he had a vinyl top put on, white walls, fender skirts. He had bought this for a gift for Carole Lombard. Unfortunately, she wasn't really able to enjoy it because, as many of you know, Carole Lombard was on her trip, flying on her way back home from selling some war bonds, and the plane crashed and she perished. So, very sad story. Clark Gable never, after that, used the car. It went in the hands of many different directors from there. Now we have a Delahaye, beautiful Delahaye convertible in red that was owned by Sir Elton John. And interesting about this car is, Elton John is driving this car, and it's a hardtop. And he said to the friend he was with at the time, "Geez, I wish I had got a convertible." His friend said, "Oh, I know somebody that can make it into a convertible." They took it to a shop, had the top chopped, a nice convertible top put on it. But unfortunately, With a coupe, a lot of the structural integrity is picked up by the roof structure. So without that roof structure, it was a weak car, and it's sagging badly now in the middle. Doors don't open correctly, and the frame has some issues. So right now, we're trying to figure out if we want to find another Delahaye coupe, take the roof from that, put it on this car, and restore it to its original configuration of a Delahaye coupe. And if you've ever seen pictures, or if you want to Google the Delahaye, this model in a coupe, it's really, really a beautiful car. Next to that, we have Grease Lightning. So, of course, this is Grease Lightning. This was built by Barris. Everybody knows the movie Grease. This was actually for the musical that toured with Olivia Newton-John. John Travolta refused to tour with the company doing the musical, so that's why his name is painted on the door, John Travolta, because they wanted to associate both Olivia and John Travolta with the musical. But this is a copy of the car that was used in the movie, where it's built by the high school shop, and then John Travolta drives it all around. We have a very unique car next, and it's actually a manure spreader. So this particular hot rod, we'll call it, it's a mid-engine manure spreader. So it's a 1800s manure spreader. A farmer would put manure in it. It would be towed by a horse. The back would spin, spread the manure out on the fields, hence fertilizing the crops. Well, Bob Hope had an idea that he wanted to give John Wayne something special for his birthday. So he had this built, and George Barris constructed a major portion of this vehicle, the manure spreader with a mid-engine Chevy and Conestoga wagon top, and horns on the front. Very, very unique hot rod. It does run. I've driven it to meets, but it's crazy. One day we had John Wayne's son in here, and I asked him, I said, so what did your father think when he got this vehicle? It actually was named the Texas Bullshit Scraper. And he said, you know something? He had a big laugh with Bob Hope. It ended up going into the barn, and that's where it said. He said it wasn't something that my father was going to drive around. Next, we have a 1965 Mustang that was also customized by George Barris, and it was used by Frank and Nancy Sinatra. They were in a movie together called Marriage on the Rocks. This has leopard fabric on the, excuse me, it has tiger fabric on the sides, or like zebra fabric, and zebra fabric inside. Has a wet bar, it has a television in the dashboard. Really, really a crazy car, but like I said, it started out life as a 1965 Ford Mustang. Next to that, we have a 1948 Chevy. Now this Chevy Fleetmaster was donated to us by Jack Nicholson. This was used in the movie The Two Jakes, and I think also Chinatown. Jack Nicholson liked to obtain the cars that he'd used in movies, and then he used them for a short while, had them in his collection, and this particular one he donated to us. He also donated to us the Mercedes that he used in the movie Witches of Eastwick. After that movie, he had that for a while. He used to drive it, and he donated that to us. Now we have a VW Beetle, painted crazy. Those of you may remember, this was Austin Powers' Shagmobile. Right now we have some plastic on it just to protect it because the decals are very fragile that the studio had put on, and they're starting to fade, so we try to protect that. So this was his time machine in The Spy That Shagged Me. He would be able to get in this, and he traveled back in time. And so that's why the Volkswagen was chosen, because it had nostalgia from the 60s and flower power and things like that. Now we have the 308 of the Ferrari 308 of the TV series Magnum PI. This is one of the actual cars that Magnum drove, that Tom Selleck drove. If you watch that series, you'll never see him driving one of these cars with the top on, because even though they lowered the driver's seat, they kind of took some stuffing out of the bottom, they redid the seat slides, he was still too tall. He could not put the top on and drive. So he's always driving this car with no top on it. But it's in Hawaii, so I guess it works. Next to that, another VW. This is the VW bus that was used in Little Miss Sunshine. The exact bus, they built a few of these. This was driven in the sequence, and you notice that if you see it in the movie, it gets a scrape on the side, a dent on the side, and that's right there in the door and in the rear quarter. Now we have a Chrysler Imperial convertible. This was Katharine Hepburn's daily driver. This is the car that Katharine Hepburn drove herself to the studio and all the time. And actually, she had a chauffeur, but she preferred to drive herself, so oftentimes she would drive and her chauffeur would ride with her. Now we have a camera car. So this is a Chrysler camera car. Chrysler built 3 of these. This particular one they gave to Howard Hughes at RKO Studios. And basically before this, camera cars were whatever the studio could get their hands on. It might be a 1928 Essex or a Model A or a 40 Ford. But what Chrysler did is they said, look, we're going to build a car specifically for the studios. It'll have a deck on the back where they can put all the scaffolding and rigging for the cameras. It's a convertible top, so they can put the top down if they need communication back and forth, or if it's really hot, the top can be put up. It has air conditioning, it can protect the driver, and maybe a cameraman inside. But this was a car that was specifically built just for studios. Now, next to that, we have a Stutz Italia. Now, the Stutz Italia was based on a Pontiac Grand Prix, and then it was sent to Italy to be bodied. But what's interesting about this car, it is a gaudy car, it's a very flashy car. So if I said to you, who do you think would drive this car? Well, this car actually had 3 owners. It was ordered by Elvis Presley, and he got impatient and never took delivery of this car. Then so he sold the rights to Evel Knievel. Evel Knievel did take delivery, drove the car for a while, and it was a coupe. It was not a convertible, it was a coupe. And Evel Knievel said, you know what, I really want a convertible. I'm not so sure I like the coupe. Took it to Gene Winfield out in the desert here in California. Gene Winfield chopped the top, made it into a convertible. Evel Knievel said, I still don't like it. So he sold it to Wayne Newton, and Wayne Newton had it for many, many years. And like I said, if you look at it with all its gold trim and its exhaust out the side and side pipes, it's the perfect Vegas Strip car. So you can imagine Wayne Newton driving that up and down the Vegas Strip. As we walk around this yellow Pantera, this is the Pantera that was owned, well, I should say purchased by Elvis Presley and given to Linda Thompson, his girlfriend at the time, as a gift. And of course, she said to me when I saw her one time, she said, I don't know, I asked her how she liked it, and she goes, you know something, he buys me a used car. We're dating, he doesn't even buy me a new car. He buys me a used car, and it's a smelly car, the engine is loud, there's no ventilation. She said, I hated it. Anyway, that's her story. But Elvis buys the car, and why this is famous, Elvis has many cars. This is the car that he shot 3 times. He had an argument with Linda Thompson, he runs out of the house, and what he's going to do is he's going to run out of the door of Graceland, he's going to jump in this car, and he's going to peel out of the driveway, and he's going to say, there you go, Linda. Unfortunately, he jumps in the car, won't start. Gets out of the car, he kicks the door in with his big size 10 shoe, jumps back in, still wouldn't start. Frustrated, jumps out of the car again, pulls a .38 revolver out of his sock, and shoots the car 3 times. And hopefully, I don't know if you can, but if you can see that we have a bullet nick, a .38 nick here in the steering wheel. there's one back here, and underneath that carpet are still the holes that are in the floor where the bullets passed through. So everybody said, so after he shot it, did it start? Answer is yes. I don't know how, but you know, it did. It started, and he was happy. So you would say, why would anyone shoot a car? But I don't think this is the only car that Elvis shot. I think he shot one of his Cadillacs. And I also have heard that when he would be staying in a motel with his entourage, of course, he'd be sitting on the couch watching TV. They didn't have remotes in that day. So if he didn't like what was on, or somebody was saying something bad about Elvis, he would pull that same .38 out of his sock and shoot the TV. One of his friends at the time had told me that he says, you can't imagine how many TVs we had to purchase. The next car is a Mustang for Creed 2. This is the Mustang that was lost and then had to be won back. Herbie. Everybody loves Herbie the Love Bug. So this is second generation Herbie. This was from the movie Fully Loaded, which starred Lindsay Lohan. And if you remember in the movie, Herbie becomes a race car. And this is a race car Herbie. It was certified by NASCAR. Had to be in order for them to run it on a NASCAR oval, full roll cage. The VW engine puts out over 200 horsepower. So this particular car on the oval was clocked at doing about 136 miles an hour. I've driven it, and there's no way I'd want to go 136 miles an hour. It was scary at the speed that I was driving it. Next to that, we have the Thunderbird of Thelma and Louise. They had several Thunderbirds for the movie. Of course, one went off the cliff. Others were damaged. This particular car we kind of call the hero car. So when they would be driving or they would be sitting in it talking, this is the car they would use. Their mirrors have been taken off the sides because that's where the cameras would be hung off the doors. But this is an actual car from the movie. Next in line, of course, is the Plymouth Fury Christine. So this is Christine. This was the evil car. Tormented her owner, killed several people. But anytime there was damage, Christine would morph back together. So that's a sampling of the movie cars that we have here and heads of state cars. We have, like I said, many more cars, and hopefully when we reopen, when the museum reopens, you'll all come in, take the guided vault tours, get the stories of all the cars, get the stories. Every car in here has a story, and they're all very, very interesting stories. So with that, I'm going to leave you. I'll be back at another time. Like I said, check the website. We have plenty of videos coming up. We also have interactive educational videos. So please tune in. And until then, be healthy and be safe.